Stream on the tubes should be going now. So if you prefer over there, you're more than welcome. Bring that over here so I can as well. But I've also started, Friday was my very first Friday Night Live. We're going to be doing some Outback Johnny 123. It is and it isn't. There were some creative changes, but the overall story is the same. I just find it funny that they changed her name from Frisby to Brisby to avoid some copyright conflicts with the Frisby toy company. But yes, I did start doing a Friday night live. Last Friday was my very first inaugural Friday Night Live, and we're calling that one Friday Night Frontiers, where we delve into a lot of pulp science fiction, and there'll be some cross-pollination between Wednesdays and Fridays, but Sundays are strictly for bedtime stories. So, speaking of which, I say we get started. Turn down the music. All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Storytime with Undead Papa. Tonight is Sunday Night Bedtime Stories, where we continue our journey through Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH by Robert C. O'Brien. Before we begin, for anyone who might be joining us for the first time tonight, or if you could use a quick reminder, let's just take a moment to remember where we left our story. Mrs. Frisby is trying to save her family before the farmer begins plowing her field, but her son Timothy is sick with pneumonia and too weak to be moved from their home. She has gone to seek help from the mysterious rats that live beneath the rosebush, rats who have a secret. Through their leader, Nicodemus, Mrs. Frisby has begun to learn their story. Years ago, the rats were captured and taken to a laboratory called NIMH, or the National Institute of Mental Health, where experiments changed them forever. When we left them, the rats had just discovered something extraordinary. They had learned how to read and realized the instructions for opening their cages were written right in front of them. And that's where we continue tonight. So wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back, relax, because story time is about to begin. The air ducts. And so it was. By teaching us to read, they had taught us how to get away. Justin climbed easily up the open door of his cage and vanished over the top with a flick of his tail. He came back an hour later, greatly excited and full of information. Yet it was typical of Justin that even excited as he was, he stayed calm. He thought clearly. He climbed down the front of my cage rather than his own and spoke softly. We both assumed that by now the other rats were asleep. "Nicodemus, come on out. I'll show you how." He directed me as I reached through the wire bars of the door and felt beneath it. I found the small metal knob, slid it forward and sidewards, and felt the door swing loose against my shoulder. I followed him up the side of the cage to the shelf above. There we stopped. It was the first time I had met Justin face to face. He said, "It's better talking here than around the partition." "Yes. Did you get down?" "Yes." "How did you get back up?" "At the end of this shelf there's a big cabinet. They keep the mouse cages in it. It has wire mesh doors. You can climb up and down them like a ladder." "Of course," I said. I remember now. I had seen that cabinet many times when my cage was carried past it. For some reason, perhaps they were smaller. Because they were smaller, the mice were kept in cages within a cage. Justin said, "Nicodemus, I think I found the way to get out." "You have? How?" "At each end of the room there's an opening at the baseboard at the bottom of the wall. Air blows through one of them and out the other. Each one has a metal grid covering it, and on the grid there is a sign that says, 'Lift to adjust airflow.' I lifted one of them. It hangs on hinges just like a trap door. Behind it there's a thing like a metal window. When you slide it open, more air blows in. But the main thing is, it's easily big enough to walk through and get out." "But what's on the other side? Where does it lead?" On the other side there's a duct, a thing like a square metal pipe built right into the wall. I've walked along it, not very far, but I can figure out where it must go. There's bound to be a duct like it leading to every room in the building, and they must all branch off one main central pipe. And that one has to lead somewhere to the outside, because that's where our air comes from. That's why they never open the windows. I don't think these windows can open." He was right, of course. The building had central air conditioning. What we had to do was find the main air shaft and explore it. There would have to be an intake at one end and an outlet at the other. But that was easier said than done. And before it was done, there were questions to be answered. What about the rest of the rats? There were 20 of us in the laboratory, and we had to let the others know. So, one by one, we woke them and showed them how to open their cages. It was an odd assembly that gathered that night under the dimmed lights in the echoing laboratory, on the shelf where Justin and I had talked. We all knew each other in a way from the passing of messages over the preceding months, yet except for Jenner and me, none of us had ever really met. We were strangers, though, as you can imagine, it did not take long for us to develop a feeling of comradeship, for we 20 were alone in a strange world. Just how alone, and how strange, none of us really understood at first. Yet in a way, we sensed it from the beginning. The group looked to me as a leader, probably because it was Justin and I who were first to set them free, and because Justin was obviously younger than I. We did not attempt to leave that night, but went together and looked at the metal grid Justin had discovered, and made plans for exploring the air ducts. Jenner was astute at that sort of thing. He could foresee problems. "With a vent like this leading to every room," he said, "it would be easy to get lost. When we explore, we're going to need some way of finding our way back here." "Why should we come back?" someone asked. "Because it may take more than one night to find the way out. If it does, whoever is doing the exploring must be back in his cage by morning. Otherwise, Dr. Schultz will find out." Jenner was right. It took us about a week. What we did, after some discussion, was to find some equipment. First, a large spool of thread in one of the cabinets where some of us had seen Julie place it one day. Second, a screwdriver that was kept on a shelf near the electrical equipment, because, as Jenner pointed out, there would probably be a screen over the end of the air shaft to keep out debris, and we might have to pry it loose. What we really needed was a light, for the ducts at night were completely dark. But there was none to be had, not even a box of matches. The thread and screwdriver we hid in the duct, a few feet from the entrance. We could only hope they would not be missed, or that if they were, we wouldn't be suspected. Justin and 2 others were chosen as the exploration party. One of the others was Arthur, whom you've met. They had a terrible time at first. Here was a maze to end all mazes, and in the dark they quickly lost their sense of direction. Still, they kept at it, night after night, exploring the network of shafts that laced like a cubical spiderweb through the walls and ceilings of the building. They would tie the end of their thread to the grid in our laboratory and unroll it from the spool as they went. Time and time again they reached the end of the thread and had to come back. "It just isn't long enough," Justin would complain. "Every time I come to the end, I think, if I could just go 10 feet farther." And finally, that's what he did. On the 7th night, just as the thread ran out, he and the other two reached a shaft that was wider than any they had found before, and it seemed, as they walked along it, to be slanting gently upward. But the spool was empty. "You wait here," Justin said to the others. "I'm going just a little way farther. Hang on to the spool, and if I call, call back." They had tied the end of the thread around the spool so they wouldn't lose it in the dark. Justin had a hunch. The air coming through the shaft had a fresher smell where they were, and seemed to be blowing harder than in the other shafts. Up ahead he could hear the whir of a machine running quietly, and there was a faint vibration in the metal under his feet. He went on. The shaft turned upward at a sharp angle, and then, straight ahead, he saw it. A patch of lighter-colored darkness than the pitch black behind him, and in the middle of it 3 stars twinkling. It was the open sky. Across the opening there was, as Jenner had predicted, a coarse screen of heavy wire. He ran towards it for a few seconds longer and then stopped. The sound of the machine had grown suddenly louder, changing from a whir to a roar. It had obviously shifted speed. An automatic switch somewhere in the building had turned it from low to high, and the air blowing past Justin came on so hard it made him gasp. He braced his feet against the metal and held on. In a minute, as suddenly as it had roared, the machine returned to a whisper. He looked around and realized he was lucky to have stopped. By the dim light from the sky, he could see that he had reached the point where perhaps 24 air shafts came together like branches into the trunk of a tree. If he had gone a few steps farther, he would never have been able to distinguish which shaft was his. He turned in his tracks, and in a few minutes he rejoined his friends. We had a meeting that night, and Justin told all of us what he had found. He had left the thread, anchored by the screwdriver, to guide us out. Some were for leaving immediately, but it was late, and Jenner and I argued against it. We did not know how long it would take us to break through the screen at the end. If it should take more than an hour or two, daylight would be upon us. We would then be unable to risk returning to the laboratory and would have to spend the day in the shaft or try to get away by broad daylight. Dr. Schultz might even figure out how we had gone and trap us in the air shaft. Finally, reluctantly, everyone agreed to spend one more day in the laboratory and leave early the next night. But it was a hard decision. With freedom so near and everyone thinking as I did, Suppose Dr. Schultz grew suspicious and put locks on our cages. Suppose someone found our thread and pulled it out. This was unlikely. The near end tied to the spool was 6 feet up the shaft, well hidden. Just the same, we were uneasy. Then, just as we were ending our meeting, a new complication arose. We had been standing in a rough circle on the floor of the laboratory just outside the 2 screen doors that enclosed the mice cages. Now, from inside the cabinet came a voice. "Nicodemus?" It was a clear but plaintive call, the voice of a mouse. We had almost forgotten the mice were there, and I was startled to hear that one of them knew my name. We all grew quiet. "Who is calling me?" I asked. "My name is Jonathan," said the voice. "We've been listening to your talk about getting out. We would like to go too, but we cannot open our cages." As you can imagine, this caused a certain consternation. Coming at the last minute, none of us knew much about the mice except that we had heard Dr. Schultz dictate into his tape recorder. From that, we had learned only that they had been getting the same injections we were getting, and that the treatment had worked about as well on them as on us. They were a sort of side experiment without a control group. Justin was now studying the cabinet. "Why not?" he said, "if we can get the doors open." Someone muttered, "They'll slow us down." "No," said the mouse, Jonathan, "we will not. Only open our cages when you go, and we will make our own way. We won't even stay with you if you prefer." "How many are you?" I asked. "Only 8. And the cabinet doors are easy to open. There's just a simple hook halfway up." But Justin and Arthur had already figured that out. They climbed up the screen, unhooked the hook, and the doors swung open. "The cages open the same way as yours," said another mouse, "but we can't reach far enough to unlatch them." "All right," I said. "Tomorrow night, as soon as Dr. Schultz and the others leave, we'll open your cages, and you can follow the thread with us to get out. After that, you're on your own." "Agreed," said Jonathan, "and thank you." "And now," I said, "we should all get back to the cages. Justin, please hook the doors again." I had latched myself into my cage and was getting ready for sleep when I heard a scratching noise on the door. And there was Jenner, climbing down from above. "Nicodemus," he said, "can I come in?" "Of course, but it's getting towards morning." "I won't stay long." He unlatched the door and entered. "There's something we've got to decide." "I know," I said. "I've been thinking about it too. When we do get out, where are we going to go?" I could not see Jenner's face in the dark of the cage, but I knew from his voice that he was worrying. I said, "At first I thought home, of course, but then, when I began remembering, I realized that won't work. We could find the way, I suppose, now that we can read, but if we did, what then? We wouldn't find anyone we know." "And yet," Jenner said, "you know that's not the real point." "No. The real point is this. We don't know where to go because we don't know what we are. Do you want to go back to living in a sewer pipe and eating other people's garbage? Because that's what rats do. But the fact is, we aren't rats anymore. We're something Dr. Schultz has made, something new. Dr. Schultz says our intelligence has increased more than 1,000%. I suspect he's underestimated. I think we're probably as intelligent as he is, maybe more. We can read, and with a little practice we'll be able to write, too. I mean to do both. I think we can learn to do anything we want, but where do we do it? Where does a group of civilized rats fit in?" "I don't know," I said. "We're going to have to find out. It won't be easy, but even so, the first step must be to get out of here. We're lucky to have a chance, but it won't last. We're a jump ahead of Dr. Schultz. If he knew what we know, he wouldn't leave us alone in here another night, and he's sure to find out soon." "Another thing to worry about," Jenner said. "If we do get away, when he finds we're gone, won't he figure out how we did it? And won't he realize what we must have learned to read?" "Probably." "Then what? What will happen when he announces that there's a group of civilized rats roaming loose, rats that can read and think and figure things out?" I said, "Let's wait until we're free before we worry about that." But Jenner was right. It was a thing to worry about, and maybe it still is. The next day was terrible. I kept expecting to hear Dr. Schultz say, "Who took my screwdriver?" And then to hear Julie add, "My thread is missing too." That could have happened and set them to thinking, but it didn't. And that night, an hour after Julie, George, and Dr. Schultz left the laboratory, we were out of our cages and gathered, the whole group of us, before the mouse cabinet. Justin opened its doors, unlatched their cages, and the mice came out. They looked very small and frightened, but one strode bravely forward. "You are Nicodemus," he said to me. "I'm Jonathan. Thank you for taking us with you." "We're not out yet," I said, "but you're welcome." We had no time for chatting. The light coming in the windows was turning gray. In less than an hour it would be dark, and we would need light to figure out how to open the screen at the end of the shaft. We went to the opening in the baseboard. "Justin," I said, "take the lead. Roll up the thread as you go. I'll bring up the rear. No noise. There's sure to be somebody awake somewhere in the building. We don't want them to hear us. I don't want to leave the thread where it might be found." The more I thought about it, the more I felt sure Dr. Schultz would try to track us down, for quite a few reasons. Justin lifted the grid, pushed open the sliding panel, and one by one we went through. As I watched the others go, ahead of me I noticed for the first time that one of the mice was white. Then I went in myself, closing the grid behind me and pushing the panel half shut again, its normal position. With Justin leading the way, we moved through the dark passage quickly and easily. In only 15 or 20 minutes we had reached the end of the thread. Then, as Justin had told us it would, the shaft widened. We could hear the whir of the machine ahead, and almost immediately we saw a square of gray daylight. We reached the end of the shaft, and a terrible thing happened. Justin, as you will recall, had told us that the machine, the pump that pulled air through the shaft, had switched from low speed to high when he had first explored through there. So we were forewarned. The trouble was, the forewarning was no use at all, not so far as the mice were concerned. We were approaching the lighted square of the opening when the roar began. The blast of air came like a sudden whistling gale. It took my breath and flattened my ears against my head, and I closed my eyes instinctively. I was still in the rear, and when I opened my eyes again, I saw one of the mice sliding past me, clawing uselessly with his small nails at the smooth metal beneath him. Another followed him, and still another, as one by one they were blown backward into the dark maze of tunnels we had just left. I braced myself in the corner of the shaft, and grabbed at one as he slid by. It was the white mouse. I caught him by one leg, pulled him around behind me, and held on. Another blew face on into the rat ahead of me and stopped there. It was Jonathan, who had been near the lead. But the rest were lost. 6 in all. They were simply too light. They blew away like dead leaves, and we never saw them again. In another minute the roar stopped. The rush of air slowed from a gale to a breeze, and we were able to go forward again. I said to the white mouse, "You'd better hold on to me. That might happen again." He looked at me in dismay. "What about the others? 6 are lost. I've got to go back and look for them." Jonathan quickly joined him. "I'll go with you." "No," I said. "That would be useless and foolish. You have no idea which shaft they were blown into, nor even if they all went the same way. And if you should find them, how would you find your way out again? And suppose the wind comes. Then there would be 8 lost instead of 6. The wind did come again, half a dozen times more while we worked with the screwdriver to pry open the screen. Each time we had to stop work and hang on. The two mice clung to the screen itself. Some of us braced ourselves behind them in case they should slip. And Justin, taking the thread with him as a guideline, went back to search for the other 6. He explored shaft after shaft to the end of the spool, calling softly as he went. But it was futile. To this day, we don't know what became of those 6 mice. They may have found their way out eventually, or they may have died in there. We left an opening in the screen for them, just in case. The screen, it was heavy wire with holes about the size of an acorn, and it was set in a steel frame. We pried and hammered at it with the screwdriver, but we could not move it. It was fastened on the outside. We couldn't see how. Finally, the white mouse had an idea. "Push the screwdriver through the wire near the bottom," he said, "and pry up." We did, and the wire bent a fraction of an inch. We did it again, prying down, then left, then right. The hole in the wire grew slowly bigger, until the white mouse said, "I think that's enough." He climbed to the small opening, and by squirming and twisting he got through. Jonathan followed him. They both fell out of sight, but in a minute Jonathan's head came back in view on the outside. "It's a sliding bolt," he said. "We're working on it." Inside we could hear the faint rasping as the 2 mice tugged on the bolt handle, working it back. Then a crack at the base of the screen widened. We pushed it open, and we were standing on the roof of NIMH. Free. Whew. Oh my God, there's 426 people in here. Holy crow. Jamil, yeah, I love that movie. I grew up watching it over and over and over again. I actually discovered the book when I was in high school, back in the early 90s, and I've read it probably 4 or 5 times since then, and I read it at least twice to my kids. They're older now, so I hope everybody's enjoying and is relaxing. I am really super grateful to have you all here. What do you say we check that goal? Oh, my gentle Jesus. We are, wow, 9,000. I'm like 9,100 followers. That's crazy. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you. I really do. Well, thank you for all the likes and the shares and the follows. It means the world to me. The gifts, while not necessary, are genuinely appreciated, because I do use the money that I get from those to buy these books that I use for these lives. So let us continue. Love Max, yes I do. I have 3 lives that I do. This is Sunday Night Bedtime Stories, where we read family-friendly books. We've read The Phantom Toll Booth, A Wrinkle in Time, The Wind in the Willows, A Bear Called Paddington. It's wonderful, wonderful children's literature. On my other lives, I read shorter stories, science fiction, horror, fantasy type stuff. Those are on Wednesday, and now Fridays I've added to my schedule. So it's I have the Nicole. I do have those books by the Chronicles of Narnia on my list. So to answer a question about the re-uploads, with copyrighted material, I absolutely cannot. But I am working on changing that. I have plans in the works to get sponsorships through some of these publishers that hold the rights for these books, so that I can actually do that. My lives generally always start unless I'm late, at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, yeah. So I'm going to continue on, but I am grateful that you are all here with me. Maverick Hunter, I don't know. My guess is it may not be, but when they do come at me, it'll be one of those things where I go, hey, instead of canceling me, why don't you help me out and I can sell you books. I can sell your books. Because I will say, I've had several people message me or contact me in mention in lives that I am not going to block anybody. They're not going to report me. And if they do, that's on them. I don't think they will, though. Anyway, really, I have people that come to me and say, hey, you inspired me to go out and purchase the book. So if that's not a reason for a publishing company to come to me and say, hey, we'd like to work with you, then that's what we'll do. So, but anyway, I don't know if I could read Watership Down on this one, but, so I have never read any R.A. Salvatore on here. It might not be for Sunday nights. I tend to keep Sunday nights to be more family friendly. So, but I'm going to get back to reading. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy. The Boniface Estate. Mrs. Frisby said, Jonathan and Mr. Ages got the screen open. Yes, Nicodemus said, and without them I doubt that we would have done it. The steel frame was strong, the bolt was secure, and the wire so stiff we could not have bent it enough for one of us to get through. So we were glad that they were with us and asked them if they would, after all, like to stay with us. Since there were only 2 of them, they said they would, for the time being at least. And now began a journey that was to last, with some interruptions, for almost 2 years. Parts of it were pleasant. It was a joyful feeling at first, just to be free again, and to get those laboratory collars off. And parts of it were terrible. I have made notes about all of it, and if the time ever comes when rats publish books of their own, I intend to write a book about it. It would be a long book, full of trouble and danger, too much to tell now. It was in one of the dangerous times that I lost my eye and got the scar that you see on my face. But we did have some happy times, and some pieces of great good luck. 2 in particular that helped to explain how we got here and what our plans are now. It was early summer when we got out. We had known that beforehand. We could tell by the lateness of the light through the windows, though it was dark when we finally stood on the roof. We had no trouble getting down the side of the building, however. There were downspouts on the corners with plenty of toe-holds. We dropped the screwdriver and spool of thread into one of these. A little lower there was ivy. We were all good climbers, and there was moonlight to see by. In less than 15 minutes we were on the ground, staying in the darkest shadows under the bushes when we could. We sped away from NIMH, not knowing or caring at first what direction we were going. Nobody saw us. During the next few weeks, we lived as we could. We had, in a way, to learn all over again how to get along. For although the world outside the laboratory was the same, we ourselves were different. We were a couple of times reduced to eating from dumps and garbage cans, but knowing how to read, we quickly learned to recognize signs on buildings. Groceries, supermarket, meat and vegetables, for instance, let us know that there was food inside for the taking. And once inside a supermarket at night, they always leave a few lights on. We could even read the signs on the wall directing us to Section 8 for dairy products, cheese, Section 3 for baked goods, and so on. In the country, there were barns and silos stocked with grain and corn, and chicken houses full of eggs. Occasionally, we came upon other rats, and a few times we talked with them, but not for long, because after just a few words, they would begin to look at us strangely and edge away. Somehow they could tell that we were different. I think we even looked different. Either the diet or the injections at NIMH had made us bigger and stronger than other rats, and all the strange rats we saw looked to us surprisingly weak and puny. So we were set apart from even our own kind. It was while we were in the country that we had our first important stroke of luck. We had just decided, after nearly 4 months of freedom and constant roving, to find a place to settle down, if not permanently, at least for the winter. We thought that it should be in the country, but not too far from a town, so that we would have access to grocery stores as well as barns and gardens. It was about this time, too, that I began to wonder and worry somewhat about the fact that whatever we ate, whatever we needed, we must always be stolen. Rats had always lived that way, and yet, why? I talked to some of the others about this. It was the beginning of a discontent and an idea that kept growing, although slowly. The season was autumn. We were walking one evening down a winding country road. We never walked really on the road, but along the edge so that we could vanish into the bushes or a ditch if anyone came along. You could imagine that 20 rats and 2 mice traveling in procession would cause some comment, and we did not want that. As we walked, we reached a very high fence of wrought iron, the kind that looks like a row of black iron spears fastened together with pointed tops, an expensive fence, surrounding a large estate with a big, expensive-looking house in the middle, and well-kept grounds and gardens. We walked along past this fence until we reached the gate. "There's nobody living in there," said Justin. "How do you know?" "The gate's padlocked, and look, dead weeds standing outside it, not even bent. Nobody's driven in here for a while." The house was quiet, deserted. Look. The house had a quiet, deserted look. There was a letterbox in front, hanging open, empty. "I wonder if we could get in," Jenner said. "Why should we? It's a big place. Would have a big pantry, big cupboard, big freezer. If it's as empty as it looks." We turned into the grounds, moved cautiously from beneath some bushes. We watched the windows. As dusk fell, lights came on in several of them, both upstairs and down. Jenner said, "That's supposed to make us think there's someone there." "Yes," said Justin, "but there isn't. I could see one of the lamps when it came on. There was nobody near it. And if they all came on at the same time, automatic switches to keep burglars away." "Well, they're not keeping me away," said Justin. He ran to the house, climbed to one of the windowsills, and looked in. He tried another, then came back. "Nobody," he said. So we went in. We found a small window in the back with a cracked pane, knocked out one corner of the glass, and climbed through. At first, we planned just to look for food. We found it, too, enough to last us for a year or more. As Jenner had predicted, there was a big freezer, well-stocked, bread, meat, vegetables, everything, and the whole room full of shelves covered with tinned food. The tins baffled us at first, as they had in the grocery stores. We could read what was in them, but we couldn't get it out. Then Arthur found a machine on the kitchen counter. He read the instructions on the side of it. Slide tin under cutter and press switch. We tried it. The tin turned slowly around in the machine, and when we pulled it out, the top had been cut free. I'll always remember what was in that first tin. Vegetable soup. Delicious. After we had eaten, we wandered around the house. It was a rich man's mansion, with beautiful furniture and fine rugs and carpeting on the floor. There was a crystal chandelier in the dining room, and a big stone fireplace in the living room. But the greatest treasure of all for us was in the study. This was a large rectangular room with walnut paneling, a walnut desk, leather chairs, and walls lined to the ceiling with books. Thousands of books, about every subject you could think of. There were shelves of paperbacks. There were encyclopedias, histories, novels, philosophies, and textbooks of physics, chemistry, electrical engineering, and others, more than I can name. Luckily, there was even one of those small ladders on wheels they use in some libraries to get to the top shelves. Well, we fell on those books with even more appetite than the food, and in the end we moved into the house and stayed all winter. We could do that, it turned out, without much fear of discovery. We learned that from some newspaper cuttings I found on the desk in the study, they were about a wedding, and most of them showed pictures of a newly married couple leaving a house to begin their honeymoon. The groom was a Mr. Gordon Boniface, heir to the gold Stetson fortune, and the house they were leaving was the house we were in. According to the clippings, they were going on a trip all the way around the world. They were coming back to the Boniface estate in May. Until then, it was our estate. Oh, there was a caretaker gardener who came 3 times a week, and once in a while he would check the house in the cursory sort of way. That is, he would unlock the front door, glance around to see that everything looked all right, and then lock it and leave. But he didn't live there. He lived in a small house down the road, and we were expecting him when he came. We had figured out, from the way the place was kept up, the lawns mowed, the leaves raked, gardens weeded and watered, that there had to be somebody working on it. So we posted a watch, saw him coming, and kept watching him all the time he was there. And we made sure when he looked in the house that everything did look all right. This involved a certain amount of work. We had to haul our empty tin cans and other rubbish at night out into the hidden place in the woods quite far from the house. We cleaned up after ourselves carefully. We learned to use the water taps and the dusting cloths we found in the kitchen cupboard. If the caretaker had looked more closely, in fact, he would have seen that the kitchen counters were somewhat shinier than they should have been in an empty house. But he didn't. He never even noticed the small corner of glass missing from the back window. And all winter, far into the night, we read books and we practiced writing. Well, we are about an hour in, and I really truly appreciate everybody that's here. We are currently at 9,300 followers. That's just crazy. Tessa's here. Love Max, I am glad you're enjoying yourself. That, believe it or not, that means the world to me. Oh, and Joe, I appreciate you too. Hey, Nerd Unleashed, how are you? So glad to see you guys here. Reading for Book It. Holy, that's crazy. I remember Book It. That's it's funny. Back on Halloween, I read from a book of short, scary stories that I had purchased when I was in grade school back in the early mid-'80s at a Scholastic book fair. And it was like, talk about nostalgia bomb. Scholastic book fair is great. So, well, thank you. I really appreciate it. You guys are wonderful. You really are. 400 new followers. That's nuts. So we are at 9,320 followers. I am like so stoked to get this close. Even if I don't make 10,000 tonight, I am like over the moon happy. So, crazy ER shift. Well, I am glad you are here, Inertia 369. Welcome in. Sit back, relax, and take a load off. I'm glad to have you here. I grew up with a nurse as a mom, so I can definitely appreciate crazy ER shift as a nurse. Oh, boarding up yeah, it's I can hear the wind howling outside. We're in Western New York, and it's a little crazy, but we'll see. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Nerd Unleashed. I'm glad you're here either way. You are very welcome. Yeah, I've been visiting up at the local hospital this week. For those of you that don't know, my mom's been in the hospital, so she took a pretty good fall early last week, busted her left femur up by the hip joint, and they had to do surgery to put some plates and screws in to keep everything in place. And she's been healing up, but she's 77. She's a stubborn old bird. I love her to death. I appreciate it. Thank you. Love Max, I've been reading for people, on the internet, almost a year. Outside of that, my entire life. I love telling stories. And one of the main things that started me down this path of reading these, doing these lives, especially on Sunday nights, is that I miss reading to my kids. My daughters are 18 and 20, and some of the best memories I have for them is sitting down on the floor next to their bunk beds, and them leaning over the mattresses, looking over my shoulder while I read. And, I kind of think of this as the same thing. And, yeah. So I appreciate you guys coming in. Heroic effort. Well, I wish you the best in healing. I really do. Cardiac anxiety. Wow. And heart failure. I wish you the best. I truly do. I truly do. Yeah, she's a fighter. Oh boy. She's a fighter. She used to be a nurse. So you can imagine former nurse in the hospital. Oh. So, well, I could sit here and chat with you guys all night, but that's not what you came here for. So I'm going to keep reading. We'll catch up after I'm done. The main hall. There came a knock on Nicodemus's office door. It opened, and Justin and Mr. Ages entered. "Back so soon?" said Nicodemus. "Soon?" said Justin. "It's past noon. It's lunchtime." "Past noon?" Mrs. Frisby stood up, remembering her children waiting at home. Down in the Rats' home, in the artificial light, it was hard to tell the passage of time, and she had been so engrossed in Nicodemus's story that she had not glanced at the clock. Justin was wearing a satchel like Nicodemus, and from it he took a small paper package. "Here's Dragon's medicine," he said, putting it on the table. He asked Mrs. Frisby, "Did he tell you about the toy tinker?" Nicodemus said, "No, I was just coming to that." "But I can't stay to hear it now," said Mrs. Frisby. "My children will be waiting for their lunch." A plan was worked out. Mrs. Frisby would go home to take care of her children. Nicodemus, Justin, Arthur, and the other rats involved would work out the details of moving her house, which would be done that night about 11 o'clock, after the Fitzgibbons are asleep, and we're sure Dragon is too, said Nicodemus. Mrs. Frisby would return in the mid-afternoon to the rosebush. Mr. Ages said, "And I'm going to lie down. After making that trip with this cast, I'm tired." "You can have your choice of rooms," said Nicodemus. "Now that Jenner and his friends are gone, we have 7 empty." "Thank you," said Mr. Ages. "Mrs. Frisby, when you return, I will tell you as well as I can exactly how to put the powder in Dragon's food." As she hurried home, Mrs. Frisby considered just how much she should tell her children about all that had happened, and all that was going to happen. She decided at that stage, at least, she would not tell them about their father's connection with the rats. Also, that she would not say she had volunteered to put the sleeping powder in Dragon's bowl. That would worry them. She could tell them, perhaps, when it was safely done, when, among other things, there would be no chance for Martin to volunteer in her place. She would tell them simply that, as the owl had suggested, she had gone to the rats and asked for help. She had found them friendly and intelligent, and a group of them were coming that night to move the house to a place where it would be safe from the plow. That would be enough. She could tell them the whole story later, when she knew it all herself. But it was not enough. The children were skeptical at first, then intensely curious, especially Timothy, who was looking stronger and feeling more energetic, but still staying in bed, primarily because Teresa and Martin had made him. "But why should the rats do that?" said Timothy. "We don't know them at all. Nobody does. They keep to themselves." "Maybe it's because the owl sent me," said Mrs. Frisby, searching for an answer that would satisfy him. "They seem to be impressed by the owl." "For that matter," said Timothy, "I don't even see why the owl wanted to help. He's no friend of ours either." "Maybe they thought someday we could do them a favor in return." "Oh, Mother," said Cynthia, "how could we ever do them a favor?" "You forget. I did do Jeremy a favor, and that's what started the whole thing." "That and my getting sick," said Timothy. "I wish I could get up. I'm tired of bed." "Not yet," said Mrs. Frisby, glad to change the subject. "You must save your strength, because tonight you will have to get up for a little while when they move the house. We must be sure that you're well wrapped up and hope that the night is warm." "It will be," said Martin. "It's turned quite hot outside." They ate lunch. That afternoon, Mrs. Frisby told the children that she must leave them to confer again with the rats about moving the house. When she thought of the dangers she would face in just a few more hours, she wanted to kiss them all goodbye. But knowing that Timothy at least was already suspicious, she did not dare, but told them only that they should not worry if she was a little late getting home for supper. On her way back to the rosebush, she felt quite relieved, almost cheerful. Her problem was nearly solved, and the final solution was in sight. If all went well, Timothy would be saved. If all went well. Then the thought of what she had to do came back to her like the clanging of an alarm bell. What worried her most was not so much putting the powder into Dragon's bowl, but the fear that at the last minute she might lose her nerve and bungle it somehow. That could wreck the plans. She looked towards the Fitzgibbons farmhouse, and there, on the back porch, lying in the sun, was Dragon. He was watching a pair of sparrows playing in the grass halfway to the chicken yard, and the tip of his tail hardly twitched as he debated whether or not they were near enough to spring for. He looked very big and very dangerous. At least when he was not looking in her direction, and Mrs. Frisby hurried on to the bush, directly to the hidden entrance, and slipped inside. When she reached the arched portal, Brutus was standing guard as before, but this time he greeted her politely. "I've been expecting you," he said. "May I go in?" "If you'll just wait just a minute, I'll get Justin." He went inside the arch and pressed a small button on the wall. Mrs. Frisby had not noticed it before. "A doorbell," she said. "It rings a buzzer down below. If I pushed it 3 times, you'd see some action." "Action?" "That's the alarm signal. A dozen rats would come out of this door ready to fight. All the rest, with the women and children, would be hurrying out of the back door." "I didn't know there was a back door." "It comes out in the woods, in a blackberry bramble. It's got a longer tunnel than this one." When Justin appeared, they went down the same hallway as before, but this time, when they reached the chamber where the lift and the stairway led down, Justin paused. "Nicodemus thought you might like to see our main hall. Just a quick look. He said you asked about the plan. "I did," said Mrs. Frisby, "but he didn't tell me about it." "It's more than just a plan now, but we're used to calling it that. If you see the main hall, you'll get an idea of what we're doing." So, instead of going down as they had before, Justin led the way across the chamber, where Mrs. Frisby had noticed the tunnel continued. They walked along for what seemed like several more minutes. "Somewhere right along here," Justin remarked. "We're entering the woods. You'll notice the tunnel turns a bit crooked. We had to bend it to go around taproots, some as thick as fence posts." They went on until they came to a fork in the tunnel. "Right fork leads out to the blackberry bramble," said Justin. "Left fork leads to the main hall." They took the left fork. "Now brace yourself for a surprise." From ahead came noises. The sound of many rats talking, a sound of hurrying and thumping and of machinery running. They stepped into the room as full of activity as a factory. It was the biggest room Mrs. Frisby had ever seen, half the size of a house, with a ceiling and floor of hard gray rock. It was brightly lit with electric bulbs, here the large-sized ones, strong, unshaded, and beneath them were rats at work everywhere. Rats running electric motors that ran belts that ran small circular saws, lathes, drills, grindstones, and other tools Mrs. Frisby could not name. Rats hammering, welding, cutting, but most of all, rats hauling. There was a steady procession to and from the far end of the chamber, and each of these rats wore a harness to which they fastened a pair of large, sturdy sacks on one on each side, like a miniature pack-horse. As the rats trooped in, their sacks were empty. They disappeared into a part of the room that was hidden by a high wall of wood. When they came out, the sacks were full and heavy. As she watched a troop of 10, their sacks bulging, went past her out of the tunnel. They greeted Justin and nodded at her, but they did not pause. She noticed that just inside the entrance an electric fan whirred quietly, aiming inward, pulling fresh air into the rooms from somewhere out in the woods. Mrs. Frisby stood beside Justin and gaped. She felt dizzy at the sight. The motion, the noise, the size of the room, which must have measured 20 feet long and almost as wide. How could you ever dig out such a big room? "We didn't," said Justin. "We found it. It's a natural cave. You can see that the ceiling and floor are solid rock. That's the reason, or the main one, we chose this spot to live. Others had lived here before us, probably for centuries before there was a farmhouse. Bears, then wolves, then foxes, then groundhogs. We had quite a cleaning job to do, I can tell you. When we found it, there was a large hole, only a few feet long, leading straight in. But it was so full of sticks and leaves you could hardly see it. We closed that entrance entirely and dug another, longer and narrower, our back door. Then we dug our living quarters under the rosebush and the entrance you came in. But the cave is still our chief workshop. Let's go in. Sorry about that, just making a little adjustment. As they entered, some of the rats looked up. Some waved and smiled, but they all quickly turned back to the work they were doing, as if they were in a hurry. They're all on a schedule, Justin explained, talking close to Mrs. Frisby's ear to be heard above the noise, so they can't stop working. One group, especially busy, was gathered around an odd-shaped object of wood and metal about a foot long. It was curved and had a point at one end. It looked, Mrs. Frisby thought, rather like the side of a small boat. Could the rats be making a boat? Then she saw that they were fastening a strong metal ring to the top of it. Justin led her to it. That, he said, is our most important invention. The key to the whole plan. We made a pilot model last autumn. We tried it out and it worked. So now we're making 3 more. But what is it? It's a plow. Nicodemus designed it himself after reading every book he could find about farm tools. It's light and sharp, especially made to be pulled by rats. It takes 8 of us to pull it. More if the turf is tough. But with it, we can turn over in a day of hard work a patch of earth about 10 by 15 feet. But why? What do you need it for? Come over here and I'll show you. He led the way to the back of the cave where the high walls stood. He opened a door and beckoned her through. She stood in a large wooden bin, staring at her feet, and rising in a slope to the wall of the cave was a mountain of grain. Oats, said Justin. He led her on, opened another door on another mountain. Wheat, he said, and others, barley, corn, soybeans. We've been building these stockpiles for a long time, he said, all from Mr. Fitzgibbon's barn. We now have a 2-year supply for 108 rats, plus enough to plant for 2 crops, in case the first one fails. In there, he gestured toward the last bin in the row, we have boxes of seeds. Seeds for tomatoes, beets, carrots, melons, and a lot more. All the time they stood there, the steady procession of rats continued. They entered the bins, took off their harness sacks, filled the sacks with grain, put them on again, and left through the tunnel out of the back door. They looked, Mrs. Frisby thought, like very large ants endlessly toiling on the anthill. Justin must have got the same impression, for he said, "If the ants can do it, Nicodemus says if the bees can do it, so can we." Do what? Why, live without stealing, of course. That's the whole idea. That's the plan. The Toy Tinker. We left the Boniface estate on the 1st of May, said Nicodemus. We knew a lot more than when we went in. We'd been there 8 months. Then, said Justin, we found the Toy Tinker. They were back in Nicodemus's office. Mr. Ages, having rested, sat with them. Not quite yet, said Mr. Ages. No, said Nicodemus. That was in late summer. When we first got out, we began searching for a place to live permanently, or at least a place where we could stay as long as we wanted. We had a pretty clear idea of what we were looking for. We had plenty of time to talk about it, on the long winter evenings in the library between reading books. The reading we did. We knew very little about the world, you see, and we were curious. We learned about astronomy, about electricity, biology and mathematics, about music and art. I even read quite a few books on poetry and got to like it pretty well. But what I liked best was history. I read about the ancient Egyptians, the Greeks and Romans, and the Dark Ages when the old civilizations fell apart, and the only people who could read and write were the monks. They lived apart in monasteries. They led the simplest kind of lives and studied and wrote. They grew their own food, built their own houses and furniture. They even made their own tools and their own paper. Reading about that, I began getting some ideas of how we might live. Most of the books were about people. We tried to find some about rats, but there wasn't much. We did find a few things. There were 2 sets of encyclopedias that had sections on rats. From them we learned that we were about the most hated animals on Earth, except maybe snakes and germs. That seemed strange to us and unjust, especially when we learned that some of our close cousins, squirrels, for instance, and rabbits, were well liked. But people think we spread diseases, and I suppose possibly we do, though never intentionally. And surely we never spread as many diseases as people themselves do. Still, it seemed to us that the main reason we were hated must be that we always lived by stealing. From the earliest times, rats lived around the edges of human cities and farms, stowed away on men's ships, gnawed holes in their floors, and stole their food. Sometimes we were accused of biting human children. I didn't believe that, nor did any of us, unless it was some kind of abnormal rat bred in the worst of city slums. And that, of course, can happen to people too. Had we then no use at all in the world? Our encyclopedia had a sentence of praise for us. The common rat is highly valued as an experimental animal in medical research due to his toughness, intelligence, versatility, and biological similarity to man. We knew quite a bit about that already. But there was one book, written by a famous scientist, that had a chapter on rats. Millions of years ago, he said, rats seemed to be ahead of all the other animals, seemed to be making a civilization of their own. They were well organized and built quite complicated villages in the fields. Their descendants today are the rats known as prairie dogs. But somehow it didn't work out. The scientists thought maybe it was because the rats' lives were too easy. While the other animals, especially the monkeys, were living in the woods and getting tougher and smarter, the prairie dogs grew soft and lazy and made no more progress. Eventually, the monkeys came out of the woods walking on their hind legs and took over the prairies and almost everything else. It was then that the rats were driven to become scavengers and thieves, living on the fringes of a world run by men. Still, it was interesting to us that for a while at least, the rats had been ahead. We wondered if they had stayed ahead, if they had gone on and developed a real civilization. What would it have been like? Would rats, too, have shed their tails and learned to walk erect? Would they have made tools? Probably, though we thought not so soon, and not so many. A rat has a natural set of tools that monkeys lack, sharp, pointed teeth that never stop growing. Consider what the beavers can build with no tools but their rodent teeth. Surely rats would have developed reading and writing, judging by the way we took to it. But what about machines? What about cars and airplanes? Maybe not airplanes. After all, monkeys living in trees must have felt a need to fly, must have envied the birds around them. Rats may not have had that instinct. In the same way, a rat civilization would probably never have built skyscrapers, since rats prefer to live underground. But think of the endless subways below subways they would have had. We thought and talked quite a bit about all this, and we realized that a rat civilization, if one ever did grow up, would not necessarily turn out to be anything at all like human civilization. The fact was, after 8 months in the Boniface estate, none of us was sorry to move out of it. It had given us shelter, free food, and an education, but we were never really comfortable there. Everything in it was designed for animals who looked, moved, and thought differently from the way we did. Also, it was above ground, and that never felt quite natural to us. So when we left, we decided that our new home should be underground, preferably, if we could find it, in a cave. But where? We thought hard and studied maps and atlases. There were plenty of those in the study. Finally, we reached some conclusions. To find a cave, we would have to go where there were mountains. There aren't many caves in flatlands, and for food, it would have to be near a town, or better, near a farm. So we wanted to find a farm, preferably a big one, with a big barn and silos full of grain near the mountains. We studied the map some more, and it was Jenner, I think, who spotted this area as a good place to look. On the map, a big part of it was covered with the contour lines that showed mountains, and across those mountains were written Thorn Mountains National Forest. Beneath that, in smaller letters, it said Protected Wilderness Preserve. Bordering this, where the mountains turned to foothills, the map showed rolling country with quite a few roads but hardly any towns, which we thought ought to mean farmland. We were right, as of course you know now. It took us 2 months of steady traveling to get to the Thorn Mountains National Forest, but we found it. We are under the edge of it right now, and there are plenty of caves, most of them never visited by people because people aren't allowed to drive into a wilderness preserve. There aren't any roads in the forest, but only a few jeep trails used by rangers, and airplanes are not permitted to fly over it. We looked at a lot of caves, some big, some small, some dry, but mostly damp. Before we chose this cave and this farm, we found the toy tinker. It began as a sad sort of thing. We found an old man lying in the woods one morning near one of the jeep trails not so far from here, and he was dead. We didn't know what he died of. We guessed it must have been a heart attack. He was dressed in a black suit, old-fashioned style, but neat, not ragged. His hair was white, and his face looked gentle. I wonder who he was and where he was going, Justin said.
Oh, whoever he was, Jenner said, he wasn't supposed to be in here at all.
We ought to bury him, I said. So we did, not by digging a grave, but by covering him with a high mound of leaves and stones and twigs and earth. It was in gathering material for this mound that Justin made the second discovery. He was back in the bushes, out of our sight. "Look here," he called. "I've found a truck." It was a very ancient truck with a small round hood, but it had been lovingly polished and was wonderfully shiny. The body, which was square and large, had been rebuilt and painted red and gold. It had little windows and white curtains, and between them, lettered in gold, were signs. The Toy Tinker. Toys, repairs, hobby kits, model sets, electrical toys, all work guaranteed. Obviously, the truck had belonged to the old man. He was a peddler and a mender of toys. The red and gold wagon was his shop and his home, and he had driven into the woods to camp for the night. It was against the law, of course, so he had concealed the truck behind some bushes off the trail under a big beech tree. We could see where he had made a campfire, carefully surrounding it with stones and clearing away the brush so he would not set the woods afire. Beneath the beech tree, a narrow brook flowed. It was a peaceful spot. We could see what had probably caused the man's death. One wheel of the truck had sunk into the soft earth and was stuck. A shovel lay near it. He had been trying to dig it out. The work had been too hard for him, and he had started to go for help when he collapsed. This much we could figure out just by looking. Then somebody said, "Whose truck is it now?" "It belongs to his heirs," I said. "Whoever they are," said Jenner, "he may not even have any. He seems to have been alone." "Anyway," said someone else, "how would they ever find it?" "That's true," I said. "We don't know who he was, and if we did, we have no way of notifying anyone. So I suppose if we want it, the truck is ours. Why don't we see what's in it?" Thorn Valley. "It might almost be easier to tell what wasn't in it," Nicodemus continued. "That truck was as roomy as a small bus, and the old man hadn't wasted a square foot of it. Not that it was cluttered. On the contrary, everything was neatly in place on its shelf, or hook, or in its cabinet." I think it's wonderful that they're up listening. That means the world to me. It took us a while to understand what a treasure we had found. The truck contained, as you might expect, a big stock of toys. It also contained the old man's simple living quarters: a bed, a lamp, a work table, a folding chair, a bucket for carrying water, a plate, pots, pans, and so on. There was a tiny refrigerator with food in it, and some tinned stuff, peas, beans, peaches, things like that. Most of the toys, we thought at first, we had no particular use for. There were toy cars and trucks, windmills and merry-go-rounds, airplanes, boats, and a lot of others, mostly run on batteries. It was entertaining to look at them, and some of them we even tried out. For a while, the floor looked like Christmas morning. We tired of that and explored further into the truck. Up near the front, we found several large cardboard boxes, and when we opened them, we found that they were full of electric motors of assorted sizes, replacement engines for broken and worn-out toys. There were dozens of them, ranging from very small, no bigger than a spool of thread, up to some so heavy we could hardly move them. Next to these, we found the real treasure, the old man's tools. They were neatly arranged in shining rows inside a steel cabinet as big as a trunk. There were screwdrivers, saws, hammers, clamps, vices, wrenches, pliers. There were welding tools, soldering irons, and electric drills, and the beauty of it was, since they were designed for working on toys, they were nearly all miniature, easily small enough for us to handle. Yet they were themselves not toys. They were made of the finest tempered steel, like the tools of a watchmaker or a dentist. It was Arthur who said it first.
Do you realize what we've got here? We could open our own machine shop. With these tools and all these motors, we could make anything we wanted."
"We could," said Jenner, "except you've forgotten one thing."
"What's that?"
"We have no electricity. The old man couldn't run these tools off batteries. The small toy motors, yes, but not the real ones, not the power tools. He had to plug those and plug into house current to use those. See, there's his extension cord on the wall." There was a long coil of heavy black cable hanging from a hook on the wall. It had a plug on one end and a socket on the other. Now another rat spoke up, a rat named Sullivan. He was a great friend of Arthur's, and like him, had a particular interest in engines and electricity. "Maybe," he said, "we could plug it into a house current, too." "How?" I said. "Who'd let us?" "Do you remember that cave we looked at the other day? The one we decided was too close to the farmhouse?" And that was the beginning of it. The end you have seen for yourself. He was speaking of the cave you saw today. We all trooped back to it and examined it more carefully. It was too close, or at least closer than we had planned to live to a human habitation. But then we saw the huge rose bush near the tractor shed, where, with quite a lot of digging, we could put a concealed entrance. But most important, we noticed that there was an electric light in the tractor shed. Mr. Fitzgibbon had an underground power cable leading out from his house to the shed. We dug a tunnel to it, tapped it, and we had all the electricity we needed. Near it ran a water pipe. We tapped that too, and we had running water. Then, a few at a time, we moved the tools and the motors from the toy tinker's truck to the cave. We got nearly all of them before the truck disappeared. We went back one day and it was gone. Only the hole remained, where its tire had been sunk. The forest rangers must have found it and hauled it away, but they never discovered or disturbed the mound where the old man lay buried. So we built ourselves the life you see around you. Our colony thrived and grew to 115. We taught our children to read and write. We had plenty to eat, running water, electricity, a fan to draw in fresh air, a lift, a refrigerator. Deep underground, our home stayed warm in winter and cool in summer. It was a comfortable, almost luxurious existence. And yet, all was not well. After the first burst of energy and the moving in of the machines, the digging of tunnels and rooms, after that was done, a feeling of discontent settled upon us like some creeping disease. We were reluctant to admit it at first. We tried to ignore the feeling or to fight it off by building more things, bigger rooms, fancier furniture, carpeted hallways, things we did not really need. I was reminded of a story I had read at the Boniface estate when I was looking for things written about rats. It was about a woman in a small town who bought a vacuum cleaner. Her name was Mrs. Jones, and up until then she, like all of her neighbors, had kept her house spotlessly clean by using a broom and a mop. But the vacuum cleaner did it faster and better, and soon Mrs. Jones was the envy of all the other housewives in town, so they bought vacuum cleaners too. The vacuum cleaner business was so brisk, in fact, that the company that made them opened a branch factory in the town. The factory used a lot of electricity, of course, and so did the women with their vacuum cleaners. So the local electric power company had to put up a big new plant to keep them all running. In its furnaces, the power plant burned coal, and out of its chimneys black smoke poured day and night, blanketing the town with soot
and making all the floors dirtier than ever. Still, by working twice as hard and twice as long, the women of the town were able to keep their floors almost as clean as they had been before. Mrs. Jones ever bought a vacuum before Mrs. Jones ever bought a vacuum cleaner in the first place. The story was part of a book of essays, and the reason I had read it so eagerly was that it was called The Rat Race, which I learned means a race where no matter how fast you run, you don't get anywhere. But there was nothing in the book about rats, and I felt bad about the title because I thought it wasn't a rat race at all. It was a people race, and no sensible rats would ever do anything so foolish. And yet, here we were. Rats getting caught up in something a lot like the people race, and for no good reason. And the worst thing was that even with our make-work projects, we didn't really have enough to do. Our life was too easy. I thought of what the scientist had written about our prairie dog ancestors, and I was worried. So were many of the others. We called a meeting. Indeed, a whole series of meetings extending over more than a year. We talked and argued and considered, and we remembered our evenings in the library at the Boniface estate, when we had wondered what a rat civilization would be like. Oddly enough, Jenner, my old and best friend, took little part in these discussions. He remained rather glumly silent and seemed disinterested, but most of the others felt as I did, and slowly some things became clear. We saw our problems and figured out as well we could what to do about them. First, we realized that finding the toy tinker's truck, which had seemed like such an enormous stroke of luck, had in fact led us into the very trap we should have avoided. As a result, we were now stealing more than ever before, not only food, but electricity and water. Even the air we breathed was drawn in by a stolen fan run by stolen current. It was this, of course, that made our life so easy that it seemed pointless. We did not have enough work to do because the thief's life is always based on somebody else's work. Second, there was always the fear in the back of our minds that we might get caught, or perhaps not caught. We took precautions against that. So much is found out. Mr. Fitzgibbon was surely aware that some of his crops were being removed, and as our group grew larger, we would have to take more and more. Already he had begun lining some of his grain bins with sheet metal. That didn't bother us particularly because we knew how to get the doors open, but suppose he should take to locking them. We could cut through the locks, of course, or even through the sheet metal walls, but we have the tools for that. But it would be a dead giveaway. What would Mr. Fitzgibbon think about rats who could cut through metal? All these things we worried about and talked about and puzzled over, but we could not find an easy answer, because there was none. There was, however, a hard answer. I began taking long walks into the forest. I had an idea in the back of my head. Sometimes I went alone, sometimes with some of the others. On one particular day I went with Jenner. I had not yet told him about my idea, nor did I on the morning we set out, but merely proposed a direction. We took along enough food for lunch. I remember that it was autumn, a bright, cool day. The leaves made a rustling sound when the wind blew, and some were turning yellow. In my walks, I had been exploring the jeep trails, trying to find out where they went and where they didn't go, trying to find the wildest parts of the forest, places where not even the rangers ever went. A few times I had tried asking for information. I asked 2 squirrels, for instance, if they knew what lay on the other side of the mountain that rose before me. But they were silly, fearful creatures, and after looking at me in surprise, they both scurried up an oak tree and scolded senselessly in loud voices, shaking their tails until I left. I asked some chipmunks, and they were more polite. They couldn't answer my question, never having been farther than 100 yards from where they were born, but advised me to ask the birds. More specifically, one bird, a very old owl who was famous throughout the forest. They even told me how to find the enormous tree in which he lived. That was the beginning of my acquaintance with the owl. He knew every tree, every trail, every stone in the forest. He was, as you know, not naturally friendly towards rats or mice either, but when I told him about our life at NIMH and our escape, he grew interested. Though he did not say so, I think he had already been watching some of our activities from the air in the evenings. Anyway, he was curious and listened carefully when I told him about our problems and my ideas for solving them. I have talked to him many times since. It was he who told me about Thorn Valley. The valley lies deep in the forest beyond the big tree. The jeep trails do not cross it nor even go close to it, for the mountains around it are forbidding, too steep and rocky even for jeeps, and are covered with thorny thickets. The owl told me that in all the years he had been flying, he had never seen a human being near it. At the bottom of the valley is level and broad and nearly a mile along. Steep cliffs wall it in all around. There are 3 ponds or small lakes in it, and apparently these are fed by springs, for they never dry up. On clear days, the owl said he sometimes saw small fish swimming in them. I thought, could rats weave fish nets or make fish hooks? It was this valley I was looking for the day I set out with Jenner. I had careful directions from the owl, yet it took us half a day moving briskly to reach the base of the mountains. Then up very steeply for more than an hour. Not really difficult for us, since rats are better climbers than men. Also, we are shorter, so we had little trouble with the spiny underbrush. From the top of the high ridge, at last, we looked down, and the valley lay before us. It was beautiful and still, a wild and lonely place. Through the green and yellow treetops below us, I could see the water of one of the ponds sparkling in the sun. I got the idea that our eyes, were the first ever to see it. Yet that was not true, for as we descended into the valley, a deer suddenly appeared in the trees ahead and went bounding off down the slope. There were wild animals there, and I wondered if they even suspected that outside these walls of mountains there were cities and roads and people. Most of the valley floor was in forest, great spreading oak and maple trees. But near one of the ponds I saw what I had hoped to find: a large natural clearing, a glade where only coarse grass and wildflowers grew, and some clumps of raspberry bushes. This clearing was on the far side of the valley. Beyond it, the mountain wall rose again, a steep slope with big outcroppings of stone, granite ledges that thrust 6 or 10 feet out of the earth. "We could live here," I said to Jenner. "I suppose we could," he said. "It's a beautiful place. But it's a long way from the barn. Think how far we'd have to carry food, and no electricity." "We could grow our own food," I said. I started to add, but didn't, and maybe someday make our own electricity if we decided we wanted to. "We don't know how. Anyway, where would we grow it?" "Right here. It would be easy to clear away these weeds and bushes, and if we dug into that mountainside under those rock ledges, we'd have all the cave space we wanted, dry and warm, with a good roof. There could be room enough for 1,000 of us.
There aren't 1,000 of us.
There might be someday. But why? Why move? We've got a better place to live right now. We've got all the food we want. We've got electricity and lights and running water. I can't understand why everybody talks about changing things. Because everything we have is stolen. That's silly. Is it stealing when farmers take milk from cows or eggs from chickens? They're just smarter than the cows and chickens, that's all. Well, people are our cows. If we're smart enough, why shouldn't we get food from them? It's not the same. Farmers feed the cows and chickens take care of them. We don't do anything for what we take. Besides, if we keep it up, we're sure to be found out. What then? What if we are? People have been trying to exterminate rats for centuries, but they haven't succeeded, and we're smarter than the others. What are they going to do? Dynamite us? Let them try it. We'll find out where they keep the dynamite and use it on them. Then we'd really be found out. Don't you see, Jenner? If we ever did anything like that, they'd figure out who we are and what we know. Then only two things could happen. Either they'd hunt us all down and kill us, or they'd capture us and put us back in a sideshow, or maybe take us back to NIMH. And this time we'd never get away. I don't believe any of that, Jenner said. You've got this idea stuck in your head. We've got to start from nothing and work hard and build a rat civilization. I say, why start from nothing if you can start with everything? We've already got a civilization. No, we haven't. We're just living on the edge of somebody else's, like fleas on a dog's back. If the dog drowns, the fleas drown too. That was the beginning of an argument that never had a satisfactory ending. Jenner would not yield to my point of view, nor I to his. It wasn't that he was lazy and didn't want to work. He was just more cynical than the rest of us. Stealing did not bother him, and he was a pessimist. He never believed that we could really make it on our own. Maybe he was right. But I, and most of the others, felt that we must at least try. If we fail, well, then I suppose we must come back here, or find some other farm, or eventually forget all we learned and go back to stealing garbage. So we began working out the plan. It has been a long time coming. 3 years ago this spring we started watching Mr. Fitzgibbon to learn what he did and how he did it. To bring food out of the earth, we collected books and magazines on farming. We discovered early that in order to stop stealing, we would, for a while, have to steal more than ever. We've laid up a 2-year food supply so that even if we don't succeed in growing a good crop the first year, we won't go hungry. We've got 2/3 of it moved to Thorn Valley already, and we've dug a dry cave to store it in under one of the big rocks. We've got seeds, we have our plows, we've cleared and cultivated part of the land near the pond, and in a few days we'll begin our first planting. We've even dug some irrigation ditches in case there's a drought. We have a schedule worked out, sort of a countdown. And by early June we will be out of this cave, and out of Mr. Fitzgibbon's barn. I hope forever. Well, that is where we will leave off for the evening. I really, truly appreciate you being here with me. It has been another beautiful night. We are up at 9,540 followers. We are 60 followers away from 10,000. And I appreciate you all so very much. So that's where we'll leave our story for tonight. Thank you all for spending a little time here with me this evening. I would keep going all night if I could, but my voice is starting to give out. Next Sunday, we will return to bring our journey through Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH to its conclusion. So if you'd like to hear how Mrs. Frisby's story ends, I do hope you will join us. And if you enjoy darker tales, we'll come back on Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for 4 stories from 4 masters of horror. And if you enjoy these stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider subscribing. It's only $2.99 a month, and it helps keep the campfire lit. I appreciate all of you sincerely. Until then, please be kind to each other. And be kind to yourself. Because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night.